How to effectively offer validation. That's going to be our topic today. And I look forward to talking with you a little bit about how to use this important principle of validation in your relationship. So stay tuned. Okay, so this topic of validation, if you haven't seen our YouTube video on empathy yet, go take a look at that video. Validation is a really important component of empathy, and often this principle of validation and empathy go hand in hand. One of the things that really causes individuals to be hesitant in offering validation often in their relationship is they're worried that validation is going to be mistaken for agreement, right? So they're not sure how to express validation without accidentally inferring agreement to their partner. And that can be troubling for spouses when they're trying to offer validation about a conflict that's happening between two partners, right? So I was working with a couple recently who were running into this issue, right? So the wife is feeling emotionally neglected by her husband, and she's trying to express to him these ways in which she would love for him to show up a little bit more available to her for that emotional intimacy and emotional connection. And he's been very hesitant to practice this validation principle. And the reason he's hesitant to practice it with her, right, to lean into what she's trying to say and acknowledge what she's saying, is because he's worried that if he does that, she'll take it to mean that he agrees with her, that he stinks. And because he stinks in the relationship, she's right, he's wrong, and she wins the conflict, right? And so he's really worried because of that to offer validation, something that would actually be so healing and so helpful for her. If he could offer it, he's hesitating. And it makes sense why, right? Like we can look in from the outside and say, that makes complete sense why he doesn't want to offer validation if he's concerned that it'll be mistaken for agreement. But validation doesn't have to mean agreement. And in fact, there's ways we can deliver validation in our relationships with other people that clearly differentiate that I'm validating you versus agreeing with you. And we want to become good at that. We want to become good at offering validation because it is such an important aspect of being empathetically connected with another person in a deep way, right? So what is validation, right? Like, so let's define it. What is this validation thing? Validation is when in a relationship, we acknowledge where another person's at in their mind and in their emotions, circumstances that are going on in their life. You can think about validation as an acknowledgement, kind of like an I see you type acknowledgement, right? So I see you and I'm connecting with you and I'm understanding you. That's what we mean by this validation principle. And just with that much of a definition, you can see why this is so important, especially for somebody that we love and care for deeply. We want them to know that we see them. We want them to know that we're feeling a little bit what they're feeling, that we're understanding a little bit what they're experiencing, that they're not alone, that we are with them in their experience, right? That's so important for any of us to feel from somebody that we love and care about, especially if some of the conflict that we're experiencing is in our relationship. So learning how to do this validation thing becomes really important, and it becomes such a fantastic way to connect with another person, especially a person that I love and care about, right? So let's use this couple as an example. The one I was sharing with you, right? She's really feeling hurt and frustrated, irritated, but mostly hurt about his disconnect emotionally. And she's trying to explain that to him, right? So she's trying to tell him, right, that I feel lonely and I feel like I don't matter and I feel like you're not interested, right? And validation, right, is coming in and it's just trying to communicate that I see you, I hear you, and I'm understanding, feeling kind of the context that you're in. And so if you were to do validation well, it may sound something like this. Babe, I'm so sorry that you're feeling misunderstood and distant and disconnected from me. I'm hearing you saying that you're feeling lonely, right? I can see in your eyes and in your emotions that you're really feeling disconnected from me. And I'm so sorry about that. I love you. I don't want you to feel disconnected from me. Right? So that would be a way in which he could validate, right? Now, he didn't say in there, and I agree with you. I suck. I'm a terrible husband. I'm doing it all wrong, right? He didn't have to say that in order to acknowledge and validate her feelings. And if he's concerned that he's sending too much of that message, that agreement message, after he's done with the validating statement, he could also follow that up with something like setting the record straight, which I talk about in the Advanced Communication Strategies module or in the whole module. I'll stick those right here. You can check them out if you would like to. I'll put a link in the description. So he could follow this validation up with a setting of the record straight, which just means helping her know where he's really at, right? So after he's done validating in that way, babe, I'm so sorry. I don't want you to feel that way, right? He could follow that up with, I love you. I care about you. I'm not trying to neglect you. I'm just not good at this emotional intimacy thing, but I want to learn about it and I want to get better at it. You deserve that kind of growth in me, right? So he can set the record straight that way, defend himself a little bit and saying, I'm not doing this on purpose. My intention isn't to hurt you or neglect you, right? I'm not a bad guy. I'm not a terrible guy. I'm just not good at it. And so I'm going to work to try to get better at it. So if he's worried that, right, that his validation might be taken as acknowledgement of his fault, right, that he sees it the same as her, that he agrees with her, that his validation means agreement, right? He can follow it up with a setting of the record straight statement like that afterwards, but we don't want him to just neglect doing the validation in the first place because he's afraid of accidentally inferring his agreement. When couples do that, when they withhold validation, what happens in conflict is that neither party really feels seen, heard, and understood. And when neither party feels seen, heard, and understood, it breeds hopelessness and frustration, sometimes even irritation and contempt, right? It creates defensiveness in two people where they then feel like they've got to get sharper with their words or more dramatic with their emotion to get their point across to the other person. And it's not that the other person doesn't understand that they're hurt and frustrated, upset. It's that the other person feels accused. And because they feel accused, the last thing they want to do is agree with the idea that they stink in the relationship, that they just suck, right? And so they don't validate, right? They don't acknowledge their partner, the thoughts of their partner, the feelings of their partner, the experience their partner's having. And instead, they respond with some form of defensive, critical firing back. And then round and round and round we go. If you want to learn more about that, check out our feedback loops video. You'd probably really enjoy that one. And I go into detail about how some of those feedback loops can happen. You can also check out our gridlock video. That would be another one that kind of highlights how these communications can go terribly, right? So a lot of times people don't practice this validation principle, especially when there's conflict between them and another person. And yet I'm here to tell you it's one of the most powerful tools that you can learn to develop if you'll practice it, if you'll apply it. It can be so healing in the relationship. In fact, if you pause to think a little bit about the last time you had a conflict with your partner, you thought through that in your mind, and you were thinking about how it went, I bet you would have loved if they would have validated what was going on for you. Right? If they would have validated, taken the time to really communicate and try to understand your thoughts and your feelings and what you hope the outcome could be. If they took the time to validate that, it would have felt so good that you were being heard and understood. Finally, right? And yet, we're so hesitant to offer that to our partner, even though it would mean so much to us if they would do it for us. So I'm here to invite you today to be the change, right? To practice this validation thing. And if it's too hard to practice in conflicts that you're having with your partner, then try to practice this concept with other conflicts they're having in their life. right? If they're talking to you about a boss that's really difficult, if they're talking to you about one of your children that are really difficult, if they're talking to you about a favorite restaurant that just closed, right? Whatever it is, whatever it might be that they might be experiencing, that you can practice validating with that thing and then slowly work to try to integrate that validation principle when they're talking about you, when it's a conflict between you and them. Trying to get practiced in such a way that you're more confident using validation instead of shying away from it, especially when there's conflicts between the two of you. And remember, validation is simply trying to acknowledge that I see you, I'm feeling and connecting with some of what you're feeling, and I'm understanding the context of what you're going through better. We're just trying to communicate that to our partner. Babe, I'm so sorry. That sounds so difficult. I can see how painful this is for you. I'm so sorry that it's painful for you, right? I wish that it could go better. Is there something that I can do to help ease that pain? And oftentimes the validation is the most effective thing you can do for them. It's the most healing thing. And then sometimes they may have some things that they would ask you to do to help that process, right? So let's practice that. Let's practice validation in our relationships. In the comments below, share with us a time that you feel like you were successful at validating. Tell us a little bit about the circumstance and what you did to be validating. If you can't think of a time you've pulled this off well, try to think about a time somebody else did a great job being validating for you, and share that in the comments below. We'd love to hear about your success with validation. As always, we love that you follow this channel. Please share it with others that you feel like it could be beneficial to, and we look forward to being with you again soon. Take care.